Hello, everyone. This is Pete DiStefano from Impiger Technologies. We're going to start our webinar today. This is the fourth in a series of webinars that we've been running over the last 8 weeks. Today, we're going to be focusing internally on employees and internal mobile applications. The title of our webinar, Employees Go Mobile. Here's how to keep them engaged with your priorities. I want to thank you all for attending, and to make our webinar the most impactful for you, I strongly encourage you ask questions through the Q&A capabilities in WebEx, and we will do our best at the end of our presentation to answer all your questions. If there is a question we can't answer, no worries. We'll make sure we get it answered, and we'll follow up to everyone on this webcast. So we're going to get going now. Again, thank you all for spending the time with us today. All right, so let's talk a little bit about our speakers. Again, my name is Pete DiStefano. We have with me today George Cowgill, who's our Chief Technology Officer. George has been with me now for these 3 sessions. It's great to have you here again, George. Thanks, Pete.
Glad to be here.
And I've got our guest speaker today, Hema Shankar, is also with Impiger. She's a Vice President of Client Partners. She works with many of our customers, and Hema is going to be taking us through an example of one of our employee engagement applications to kind of proof point a lot of the things we talked about today. How are you doing, Hema?
Hi, Pete. Thanks for the intro. I'm doing good.
Great. All right, so I'm going to keep us going here. First thing I wanted to talk about is employee engagement. And, you know, what does that mean, employee engagement? We talk about how we contribute as employees, how we engage with the company. It's not just about your job and your role, but how actively are you engaging? Are you contributing to the process, to the overall goals of the company? And, you know, there's some disturbing information that came from a variety of surveys. Here's one from a Gallup poll that talked about only 30% of employees that say they're really engaged in their job. More than 50% of employees said they weren't engaged, and 20% said they were actually actively disengaged. And this was a Gallup poll, but if you look at multiple research that's been done across the country, it's a significant issue, and it's important to understand that when we talk about engagement, you know, it's about how employees are really engaging in the sense that if they see opportunities, getting them excited to bring up ideas, to share challenges internally to the company so that things can be done to either take advantage of opportunities or identify problems. And you know, how is it that you encourage people and foster an environment, a culture that supports engagement in the company? And that's what we're going to talk about today. And really, you know, what are those correlations to mobility and technology that can actually help facilitate that?
Yes, and Pete, if I might interject as well. Yeah, we hear a lot about digital transformation today, particularly in the workplace, and it's really about changing the way people work and providing the tools that they need, that they expect in order to collaborate and move things forward. Everyone's very sensitive about efficiency and productivity, and you know, definitely their expectation is that, you know, the workplace is changing and new tools are being made available to them, and things are being automated. So that's definitely what we're talking about here with employee engagement.
That's a great point.
This slide, you know, when we talk about, you know, what's the implication to employees, definitely, you know, if they have the right tools, they're less likely to leave, and so retention is very important. But we see this, you know, across the board in terms of employee satisfaction, their productivity. No one really, you know, people have a really awareness nowadays about, you know, when things could be automated. If people are dealing with paper or they're receiving a fax, you know, they know by now that there are better ways of doing this, and they're looking to their organizations and their companies to provide the tools. And overall, with employee engagement, you can definitely see, gains in to the revenue and to the bottom line. And, overall, it translates into increased customer satisfaction because your overall organization is more responsive to the customer and, smarter workforce, essentially.
Okay. It's funny, just to kind of take another step, and I know if you've been at any of these webinars, and I'm sure you've talked about this whole idea around millennials and how they're actually more demanding of having capabilities and leveraging technology that will facilitate engagement. I thought this was an interesting quote from Seth Madison, who is an expert on workforce trends, basically saying that you have a whole generation that are basically chief technology officers, the way they've grown up with technology as a standard extension of how they engage in day-to-day life. 59% of millennials surveyed said that employer provisioned state-of-the-art technology was important to them when even considering whether or not to take a job. But I do want to make sure we don't lose focus on the fact that although millennials, there's been so much talk about how they've grown up with technology, they demand it. I think it's the evolution and the capabilities that mobility has provided that has really been the disruptive force, as is evident in this quote by Zach Holmquist. I mean, it really is, granted, we can say it's all the millennials that have been driving this, but if you really look at the evolution, and we're going to talk about that in mobility and what it's afforded us, it's not just for millennials, it's for all generations that can take advantage of this. And that's kind of what brings us to that next step. Can mobility really have an impact on increasing employee engagement? So I just wanted to share some information with you. For example, 48%, and this is from a Forrester report, 48% of employee-facing IT investments will be mobile focused. That's that was in 2016. 98% of users need to work remotely or collaboratively. So there's this change in the typical work area. This idea of an individual sitting at a desk is really changing. This idea of being a lot more flexible, not only to be able to work remote, but be able to collaborate is really changing how people work, and the demands on supporting that type of work environment need to be addressed. In many cases, they're being addressed with mobility. Okay, so approximately 80% of the global workforce, 3 billion people, performing physical or deskless work. Now that's a big number, and if you look at the second comment and then the bullet, obviously not all those deskless workers require technology solutions, but a big percentage of them either require it or could take advantage of it to increase their impact and really facilitate the role they have. Global workforce is set to increase to 1.45 billion. The reason I share these numbers with you are the fact that people have realized and are demanding that capability that now exists through the progression. This digital transformation that George talked about earlier, it's beyond the company thinking that this is good for business. It's their employees that also believe that this capability is very important to them, hence these couple of comments here. So the first one.
Pete, yeah, I mean, basically it also tracks, with their behavior in their personal life, right? We've seen this massive shift to mobile on, from anything from Facebook to other social apps and things, where it's by far the majority interface of choice is mobile. So, all this just tracks with the global shift towards mobile in general in the personal life. And now definitely we see it, and we see the advantages in the business as well.
No, that's a great point, and as it being an extension, sorry about that, I've got a little bit of a hiccup there. As a mobile device being an extension of what they're using in personal life, they want to bring that into the workforce. Hence, some of this information here, 61%, and these are employees that are being surveyed, said if the company isn't deploying mobile apps, they believe that their company is at a competitive disadvantage. 60% of those employees said mobile technology makes them more productive, with another 4 out of 10 acknowledging it causes their creativity to rise. So again, trying to connect the dots between this issue that this country has, the United States has, and I'm sure others as well, with employee engagement, and now you have a generation and an evolution with digital transformation that gives us an opportunity to help solve that problem. And the people that need to leverage that technology are also in agreement that it can really help them do their job better. And of course, the last bullet, 75% of employee-facing apps in 2017 are expected to be built with a mobile-first mindset. All of these numbers suggest that this is absolutely something that people are counting on to make a big difference going forward. All right, I just wanted to share just a couple of more statistics. You know, what are the top 3 areas that are driving this digital transformation? And we're going to talk about 2 out of 3 of these today. Customer-facing apps, it's another big deal. We actually talked about that in our previous webinar. That webinar, by the way, is available for you to watch on demand. But today, we're going to talk about mobile apps in the context of how mobile apps can be used to help with engagement, along with migrating to the cloud. So this whole idea of mobility, the cloud becomes a big part of supporting that. And then productivity apps, you know, applications, mobile apps, web portals that help increase your efficiencies. So if you look at what's driving this transformation, you've got people that are asking for it, you've got technology that's making it available, and you've got a problem out there that can be solved partially by taking advantage of these capabilities.
Yes, and this slide just reviews, you know, what mobile technologies enable. Of course, you have access anytime, anywhere. It allows the employees to respond to things, you know, as they're thinking about it and as they're engaged. It definitely fosters this employee engagement we're talking about. You've got real-time video communication. You've got tools like we're using today for collaboration and things. So you know, there's you know, you can track. You can, as the back end of businesses and enterprises are opened up, you know, you have greater visibility to internal processes when we talk about inventory control and the status of projects and products, things like that. You know, and additionally, you know, mobile technologies, they simplify what can become a cumbersome workflows. They can simplify it, complex processes, and make it, you know, just sort of a step-by-step thing that's available on everybody's mobile device. When we look at some of the business-based mobile trends for this year, and these are not all, you know, just started this year, but certainly we see a ramp up. We see continued growth in these types of applications for businesses. Of course, you know, I think we'll probably go through a couple of examples today related to news and events, just a better way for the company to be able to reach out and communicate and keep their employees informed. Many different collaboration applications related to chat and discussion forums. Large organizations need people finders, and then you know, the way that you collaborate with document management. There, you know, great strides are made in these areas We touched on earlier a little bit about just workflows. We see that as really, it's certainly a lot of the work that Impiger does right now is going back and looking at some of these workflows. Many of our customers, they see it, they know that, hey, there's probably a better way to do this in terms of automating workflows, automating approvals, providing automated notifications to them. All these things are readily available, in a mobile environment. Another interesting area that we see is, the way an employee interacts with HR and, identifies what the company policies are, what their benefits are, vacation leaves, scheduling, things like that. And another thing that we see uses, we definitely have implemented applications where, mobile can also be, a good vehicle for the enterprise to get feedback from employees, while they're thinking about it. So we see, the use of surveys and feedback mechanisms on mobile is very important as well to businesses. And then, other aspects from a mobile perspective are, of course, all employees at the end of the day are decision makers. And more data that we can provide to the employees, the more knowledgeable we make them, the smarter decisions they can make every day, whether it's strategic information or whether it's tactical information about is that part available or not, right? So there's a lot of growth and a lot of interest in analytics, and not just, say, at a P&L level, but also at a tactical level. The very last item that we'll talk on here in terms of trends are, the explosion of capability related to the Internet of Things, or IoT, and the ability to monitor devices and check the status of facilities, of processes, manufacturing processes. And of course, from a technology perspective, you can definitely use this type of capability to monitor the status of applications and things like that as well.
So I think what we'll do now is we're going to go into a couple of examples. I think we cover quite a few of these things that we talked about between what George and I are about to share with you and then what Hema is going to share with you in a little more detail. Let me first start with talking about intranet. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have an intranet, but I'm going to talk about two things here. One is having an intranet, the capability of leveraging this as an example. We've done this many times for multiple customers where this one happens to be based on SharePoint. It's a Microsoft collaboration software. But not only is this providing a common place where an employee can engage with what's going on in the company, news, events, engage with other employees, get information, engage in and use specific applications to help them work and engage within the company. But the other part of this, what I'm showing you is that internet that's also been built to be taken advantage of in a purely mobile platform. So it's not just this idea of an intranet where you can bring all the information required to keep employees up to date, let them engage. But in this case, you're actually seeing this, whether it be on an iOS or an Apple device or an Android device. So as you see here, headlines, events, news, discussion boards, links, social. I'm going to show you a couple of examples, not this whole application, but again, if you look at this first screen all the way to the left, that's kind of like your home screen, and from there you can choose what functions are right there. You can scroll up. I'm just going to show you some examples. So here's kind of a blog when you go to the news section. So you have all your news available to you, and then you can drill down in specifically just by tapping it. And again, this could be specific news within the company or press releases. It could be news about things going on in the marketplace that are applicable to your employees. Then here's an example of the capability to see what events are happening, look at those events, learn about them, add them right there to your calendar, add yourself a reminder, look at your calendar, add other things. So again, another way to engage, and in this case, this could be done off of a web portal, but in this case, it could be done right from your Apple, phone or from your Android phone. Here's an example where you can collaborate. So this is a discussion board. And by the way, you might be familiar with some of these things being done in individual applications or just on the web. This is bringing an intranet together to where all those functionalities are there together and integrated and then available at your employees' fingertips. I just thought I'd share this. This is just another example of an application integrated where I can request time off for vacation time, and not only can I do that, but this has workflows embedded in it where not only can I request time, see how much time I've taken, what do I have left, but then the approval process can be leveraged from a mobile phone saying, yes, I approve that request. So I just wanted to give you guys an example here of a full-blown intranet that's also been mobilized to work on native iOS or Android devices.
Yes, and I might add there, Pete, that, these, particularly the mobile applications, the cost is going down on, in developing mobile applications. Companies like Impiger, we have existing frameworks that we can reuse to do the presentation side on the mobile, as well as connectors and things to connect on the back end. So the level of effort, is definitely trending down. These types of things, which might, you might think, whoa, this is just for big companies. Actually, small to medium-sized businesses are adopting these types of applications as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, because that is who we build most of our applications for, these small and mid-sized companies doing these very things.
Yes, and this slide that we have up right now is a web-based solution, example of a web-based solution. This is an example of something we've done for a company for their HR portal. It allows them to do things like provide training information, as well as automate some of their HR workflows, provide access to policies, and even provide automated, or more automated anyway, streamlined performance evaluation reviews processes as well. So it's just another example of the type of interaction, the way you can change your interaction, and many times kind of offload some of the more mundane HR activities, so that HR employees can concentrate on the things that are more important in terms of interacting with employees about significant issues. But I do want to highlight that, at this point, the use of the ability to provide training material, whether that's in a web environment or on mobile. We see that quite often now, where certainly some of our customers, their employees have rather involved processes that they need to do, and basically, they're able now to, embed YouTube videos and things like that right at the appropriate time in the workflow, so that employees can be more effective and not get stuck on something.
All right. Well, look, speaking of workflows, I'm going to share with you guys now an example of a mobile app. I mean, this was a customer that was a long-standing partner with SAP, and their customer wanted to extend their current SAP implementation to include mobile. And what they did was they wanted to further automate business processes. They wanted to increase productivity, reduce time. And what they did was they worked with us to engage and integrate with the back-end ERP systems, and actually there were some other sources of data to give them the capability to further automate from a mobile phone. I think it was 15 plus workflows across various SAP modules that provide enterprise resource planning. So this mini application allowed them to get access to that SAP information, get approvals, look at inventory, sales, purchases, be able to get approvals, to make decisions, and all of this from a mobile device. So this is, and we've done a lot of this where you take existing systems, whether they be ERP, CRM systems, whether it be some proprietary system or back-end systems that you have, that a way to get that information in the hands of the employee in a way and actually improve what they can do would be to front-end it with a mobile workflow like you see here, rather than thinking I'm going to have to retool the entire back end and rebuild my application.
Yes, this next example implementation that we're looking at here is an app that we've done that basically brought asset and inventory tracking application to the mobile devices. And of course, the people who are involved in doing asset tracking and asset management are no longer tied to their desktop, so they can do this type of work as they're moving around. They're not going around making notes and then going back to their desk to do their job. So they can do it as they roam around. This particular application, again, it's asset tracking, identifying and tracking. It's a very large company, but one example would be they track all types of electronic assets, laptops, monitors, things like that. They're able to scan them, check them in and out, loan them to different organizations, and do audits. But basically, this brings the tracking and the management out to the people who are moving around the facilities, and frees them up from being tied to their desktop. In this particular application, again, you can begin to leverage the technology that's is ever expanding that we see in a mobile device in terms of scanners and cameras and things like that as well.
Okay, so to this point, we've shared quite a bit of information about engagement, how important engagement is to a company, talked about the demands that employees now have, regardless of their generation, and we've talked about the trends regarding employee engagement and specific to mobility, and showed some examples. And by the way, I'm sure most of you are already thinking of ways that you can leverage technology to improve process, enhance your productivity, etc. But what we've talked about over this series with these webinars is it's really important that when you get to that point that you've decided there's something that you want to do, regardless of what that application is, you have to have a really strong strategy so you can maximize your chance for success and minimize the risk. And when we look at customer facing and the ROI for those types of applications, and you start looking at the ROI for some of these internal facing applications, the ROI is pretty amazing. And you want to make sure that you capitalize on that and you do everything you can to make sure you get every bit of that payback by following a process. So we're going to talk a little bit about the internal mobile and web portal strategy. And I will tell you the technology decisions are probably the least important if you identify the business goals and stakeholders and users, then you do a good job at that. So I'm going to kind of take you through this real quick. And then again, at the end of the session, with Hima's help, she's going to take us through the process that one of our customers went through in an effort to build the application that they were using that had a dramatic impact on their company. So we'll start first by talking about identifying business goals. Now, I know this probably seems obvious, but it is really important to identify what is the goal, what are you really trying to accomplish, and here's just some examples. Whether you're trying to improve the amount your employees engaged. You're trying to reduce operational costs, provide better customer service, simplify and improve internal processes, reduce the amount of time it takes to, manage a project. We're going to hear about that later. Process an order, get paid, invoice a customer, whatever that is. How can I simplify it and reduce the amount of time? And everyone knows time is money. Ease of access to information so people can do a better job. They can be well informed so they can do a better job. We talked earlier about how the better an employee is informed, the better they can do their job and the better they feel about doing their job. And then, this all does boil down to the resulting increase in revenue and sales and, of course, profitability. And especially with a lot of these workflow and this automation, they really all can have an immediate impact on profitability and, quite frankly, can help with regards to increasing a company's revenue. But it's really important, even though these aren't externally facing applications, you need to formalize your goals. What is the business plan? What is the expectation? We need to take the amount of days to process an order from days to minutes or from weeks to days, or really putting a business plan together. And then, although a lot of these advances leveraging mobile technology for employee engagement, you still need to educate, you still need to have a marketing plan to go to those employees, even no matter how small your company is. You don't want to just lay it out there. You want to make sure you really highlight the goals, the advantages, the benefits, the training to make sure. So you have to make sure you have a really strong plan in how you market, even though it's marketing internally and not marketing to a customer. The second thing you need to do is make sure you understand who are the stakeholders. Now, if you're talking about an internally facing, HR is a great example, right? We talked about that intranet. We talked about training or performance reviews, and depending on what the goal is of the application, who is the HR champion, as an example. So it could be a functional leader, it could be a business owner, but you really need to make sure you've identified the stakeholder. That stakeholder should be as equally invested in accomplishing the goal and equally aware of the opportunity to leverage this application or project to achieve that goal. Next step is to identify the users and usage.
Yeah.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, and again, when Pete was talking about the overall objectives, of course, we have to tie this back to the overall company objectives. So when we're thinking about those goals and objectives, it's really, really mobile is kind of an outgrowth of, what the company's trying to do. But so yeah, you have the overall objectives, and whatever plan is formulated for mobile needs to tie directly to the overall corporate objectives or organizational objectives. Then we need to identify the stakeholders. And then, when we begin to think about this mobile application, now we've got to begin to think about the users and, the target audience. A technique that we use when we think about mobile and, application development in general is, user-centric design. And this means really identifying, the environment that they work in. I mean, if someone is, if they work in an environment that, maybe it's a warehouse type environment, maybe, they have gloves on sometimes they don't. You have to think about literally, what's the implication to the app? What's the who are those users, and what's their environment like, and what's their capability? But examples, of course, are just, employees in general, the management team, different vendors, executives, and then, if there are regional differences, there may be, different language needs and things like that as well. So, definitely it's very important to identify sort of the personas and the users of an application. It's no different whether you're doing customer-facing or whether we're doing internal. Go ahead, Pete. And of course, another thing about this process is making sure that we match the user expectation. And right now, people have literally millions of apps that they interact with. On a personal level, they have certain expectations. They have certain user model in their mind in terms of the behavior of an app, what it should do, how it should do it, and it's very important to make sure that an internal application, an enterprise application, meets the user expectation. We see, on a consumer level, if a customer doesn't like an app, they drop it in minutes. And what you want for highly engaged employees is you want an app that they appreciate, they see the value of it, and you'll find that they'll continue to make suggestions on how to improve it as well. So another key part when we think about employee-facing applications are the devices. And when we think about the process, this front-end process of planning out a mobile app, a little bit different in when we're doing employee-based applications, because there actually is a question on what devices need to be supported. If it's an environment where the company provides the mobile device to the employee and they say, well, we're exclusively an Android shop, you might actually just need to develop an Android-based application. But if it's a bring your own device environment, we know statistically that there's a breakout of Android and iOS or Apple type devices. So you might have to support both those devices in different permutations. If it's an internal application that says, look, this thing is only going to be on a tablet, you might start with that. So, but it's very important to identify the devices, and of course, the whole growth of bring your own device, it's across every business endeavor right now. We see a lot of bring your own device, and chances are you might very well have to support both primary types of devices, but this is something that needs to be determined. There are also other implications that I'll talk about in a moment about if you have a bring your own device environment, then the security and the management of the app is important as well. So, in fact, I'm going to talk about that right now. Something slightly different than consumer-facing apps, customer-facing apps, is that definitely there are cases where you're dealing with corporate information that is sensitive, and so one of the implications when we do enterprise-level apps is the company needs to have a plan for how if they provide the device, then how they manage that device, and there are tools and capabilities available to shut down a device if it's lost. Likewise, if an employee leaves the organization, there's mobile application management capabilities as well, so that just selectively you can go shut down that app, right? You can wipe it from the phone, in fact, right? So, mobile device management and mobile application management are important pieces when we think about employee and company-based apps. Security is very important as well when we start dealing with sensitive corporate information. So authentication, access, the encryption of data comes into play. Common things like two-factor authentication may be called for, so that it's not easy if somebody just grabs someone's phone to access the corporate information. All these things, it might sound like a lot, but Impiger has a lot of experience developing literally hundreds and hundreds of mobile apps. So we definitely have the tools and the capability for all these things I'm talking about. There's another thing that oftentimes comes up as you go through the planning process to make some decisions about whether you go with a web-based application or whether you go with native apps, meaning it's native to Android and native to Apple, so that it has kind of the native user interaction that users see there, or a hybrid app. this, usually will become, it is a function of budget as well, but, usually this becomes apparent what's the right solution as you go through the front-end processes that we've talked about. But generally speaking, when we think about usability, people, when they interact, if they're, use Apple exclusively or if they use Android exclusively, they have they develop what we call a mental model of how things should work. So they have an expectation on where things should be, where controls are at on the screen. And this is a challenge if you go with a responsive web design or a web-based interaction on the mobile is, it's not that native experience that the user expects. Now, it can be more cost-effective to do that, but there are definitely drawbacks, other drawbacks for things like, if you need to be able to access this data in an offline mode or access the app in an offline mode, it won't work if you're relying on web pages. So these are some of the design processes, the tools, and the technologies that come into play as we formulate a plan to develop an app, and in this case, a employee-facing app. This slide just touches on and emphasizes the importance of user-centric design and task-based usability. So everything, when we think about that target audience I talked about earlier, we identify, who these users are, and we identify kind of like what their expectation is, what their mental model of how the app should do, how it should work. And, we begin to mock up, we create wireframes, mock-ups, prototypes. Another key point that you see there, this number 4 in the middle there, is usability testing. So really, when we think about an app and we think about usability, when someone accesses an app, if it's an employee app, for example, every time they access that app, they're trying to perform a task, whether they're trying to look up their vacation policy, or whether they're trying to approve a complicated workflow. They're trying to complete a task. So when we think about usability, we break down the user experience into all these different tasks, and then we can measure them. So when we develop prototypes and mock-ups, we actually lay out the screens, and then we'll have stakeholders and end users. It doesn't take a lot of people. It could just be a few people, but we try to have them perform the task that we've laid out for the use case, and we can measure whether they get stuck, whether they're confused, whether they can't complete the task at all. Then the key to that is then to quickly iterate and improve it so that it becomes smoother and smoother. So that by the time you deploy, you've got an application that looks great and it does what people expect. Another key concept when we think about the development process is, again, everyone can get kind of ambitious about all the problems they want to solve in an enterprise, but it's definitely important to try not to do, in some cases, try not to do everything, right? And to start and to validate and to get feedback from users. So the way to do that is to kind of like look at the business problem that we talked about earlier, the business challenge, the business objective that you're trying to contribute to, or the problem you're trying to solve, and then look at it and think about it from the minimum capability. What's the minimum capability I need to put out to my users for them to perform that job or to perform that task, for me to automate that workflow? And this means sometimes some of the bells and whistles, they don't make the initial cut. So this is a so-called minimum viable product approach to app development. And sometimes the bar can be kind of high because, you definitely don't want some, sort of lame or limping type application there. But you don't want to do too much too. So very important to kind of establish some scope and to identify the minimum capability set that you're going to go out first with, and then you're going to hear from your users, and then you're going to come back and improve it as well, or extend it essentially. And so this is just an important concept in the development process. Another term that you might hear, or another thing that might come into play when we dig into the development process is, sort of like what the development process is. Two primary schools of thought. One of them pretty much outmoded or outdated now is a waterfall process. The other one is a so-called agile process. And just in a nutshell, waterfall process would be where we would just sort of like, a caricature of that process anyway would be like, well, we would just write everything down at the beginning and everything we wanted to do, and we would hand it off to development, and 6 months later, we would see what comes out the other side. And typically it's characterized by not a lot of feedback from users and not a lot of adjustments as we go through that process. And of course, this is where sometimes, these types of projects, we all hear stories about how things can miss the mark. And agile process is really kind of a response to some of the problems that we saw in waterfall. Okay, and this is just these are industry terms. And agile says, you know what, I'm not going to write everything down and then try to develop it at once. I'm going to, develop a little bit. I'm going to show it to my potential users through prototypes and mock-ups. I'm going to get feedback, and most importantly, I'm going to adjust. I'm going to tweak it, I'm going to adjust it, I'm going to improve it. And I'm going to do my development incrementally. So I'm going to develop, the minimum capability set initially. I'm going to do some drops. I'm going to get some experience in dealing with my users, and then I'm going to feed that back into my backlog and create, new feature functionality based on what my users say they need. So that's kind of the front-end process, we've been talking about with usability and with, agile processing and things like that. Another key to, employee-facing apps, of course, it is, back-end integration. So, in order for the employee to get status of the inventory or to check in with HR and see how many sick days they have left and this sort of thing, we have to integrate on the back end. And so this slide is just talking about that. Every time somebody's accessing something, it's likely, particularly in an enterprise application, they'll be connecting to the back end. And these are, databases and systems. Impiger has a lot of experience, as you can see from this slide, in connecting and opening up systems, sometimes that are, sometimes in an enterprise we could say that things are kind of siloed, you can't get there from here and this sort of thing. And what we do is we go in and, we find methods, web service interfaces and things like that, or we create them so that we can open up and provide access to the data that the employees need. So we think a lot about, when we think about mobile, about the user side of the world, but there's also the back end and the integration with your back end systems that's very important.
Okay, thank you, George. I really appreciate that. What I want to turn to now, and I know we're running out of time, I want to bring in Hema Shankar. What she's going to do is she's going to take us through the process that we went through to develop a strategy for an application for one of our customers. Hema, it's all yours.
Thank you, Pete. So, hello everybody, this is Hema Shankar and I'm one of the client partners at Impiger. I would like to take a few minutes to talk about how effective process and workflow automation has been with one of the projects we completed recently. So to protect the client confidentiality, I'll just refer to this client as company. So we have been working with this company based in East Coast for the past few months. They specialize in providing services related to clinical study. This company acts as a bridge between pharma clients and doctors who do the clinical studies for the companies. So pharma companies provide their requirements for a given drug that goes into clinical study mode. They specify what's required as a report at the end of the project. Now, this company takes ownership of this entire project end to end and coordinates between different doctors, collects reports, etc., and gives the final deliverable back to the pharma company. So Pete, can we move on to the next slide? As you can imagine, clinical trials are very process-oriented. The reports and data collection has to follow standard protocols. So at a high level, if you were to quantify this whole process in terms of tasks, I would say there are at least about 100 to 150 tasks that need to be carried out by different stakeholders. So this company manages all the tasks, they ensure procedures are followed and proper documentation is in place. Each project, as they call it, was taking anywhere between 8 to 12 months, out of which a considerable duration was spent in process management than the clinical study itself. Pete, we can go to the next one. So this model and timeline was not scalable and so the company decided to automate the process as a workflow and build a web-based solution. So the end goal was to reduce the duration of each project by at least about, I would say, 40%, with increased efficiency and streamlined process. The more we automate, the lesser room for errors, and it becomes a lot more easier to follow through the process. And that will also demand lesser time from each project manager, thereby enabling them to scale up. So this was the main goal. And most importantly, payments from pharma companies would come in sooner than later, as they get paid only when a project is complete and the clinical study report is handed over in its entirety. So the whole automation process would add value from multiple angles. Pete, the next one. So when this company approached Impiger with such a problem to solve, we were very much interested as it falls in our area of expertise. So we had few rounds of requirements-related discussion with their executive team and the project managers themselves, because they are the ones who primarily run the show. So the goal was to understand the limitations with their current approach and the pain points, and why do they think things are not so effective and not scalable today. So once we had a good level of understanding, we were able to come up with an app solution that would help them to be more efficient. So we started giving them multiple options to choose from, and after a lot of back and forth discussions, we decided to go with one strategy that they were comfortable with. So Pete, next one. So in terms of who would use this system, we spent some time learning about the different use cases, different roles, access level requirements. So a project manager, for instance, would own and have full access to the system end to end. Company executives obviously would have the ability to generate reports to monitor the progress across multiple projects. And there are people like task masters, statisticians, analysts, etc., who work under the project manager. So these people would have access to just their tasks, and it's dependent ones probably, but that's a very limited access that they would have in the system. And of course, doctors would be able to log in and upload reports to the document management system. And pharma company people would have access to these documents, and they'll be able to monitor the overall progress of their project. So each person has a different goal, or they're looking for a specific set of information when they access the system. So if we can go on to the next one. So this automation process was built as a SharePoint solution, as the company was already using SharePoint for their document management system. The solution was built primarily as a responsive web portal, since the primary users would access using a desktop or a laptop, and there were secondary users who used tablet devices or smartphones for quick access. So that's the reason we ensured that the web portal is responsive and can be viewed seamlessly from a tablet or a mobile device. The customer actually wanted us to leverage on their existing document management system, which was SharePoint based, as I said. So their data storage was partly on-prem and partly on the cloud, depending on the security requirements from their end clients, which were the pharma companies. So the way we approached this engagement was to develop a proof of concept for about 3 to 4 weeks to prove that the process can be automated. Once the POC was complete and presented to their executive team, they were very happy with what they saw and they wanted us to proceed further. So this is when the real project work, the phase 1 as we call it, began. So we split this project as phase 1 and phase 2. The scope of phase 1 was to build a minimum viable product that would be sufficient enough to replace their current project management process. And phase 2 is when we added the bells and whistles, if you will. It had all the nice to have features, such as ability to deviate from a standard protocol, ability for a project manager to override or cancel tasks, or temporarily assign tasks to someone else for a limited time if someone went on vacation. So these are features that were added to the requirement as they began using the phase 1 product. So we delivered phase 1 product. They were doing a beta testing with multiple internal resources for a few weeks. And that feedback, along with some nice to have features, was created as a requirement set for implementing phase 2. So to summarize this whole thing, the process automation helped the company function efficiently, that they were able to complete an entire project in 4 to 6 months. So this was almost 50% of the time that it used to take earlier. So that's when the company's management realized that so much time was being spent inefficiently on process overheads. So as a result, each project manager could obviously own more projects, manage them in parallel, and still produce better results because the solution helped them scale up. And as I said earlier, the company was able to get paid sooner since the delivery cycle was relatively quicker. So today, the product is being tried out in 2 of their departments. And starting the 3rd quarter of this year, the company wants to discuss with Impiger about automating the process in 6 other departments. So we take pride in saying that Impiger has been able to help this company reach their goal. So it's these kind of success stories that motivates us to do even better at the end of the day. So implementing this automation of workflow has been a great experience, and I hope it helps you have a sense of how efficient a product can be and how it can help you scale better. So, Pete, I think that at a high level.
No, that was great, Hema. Guys, I know we're a little bit up against it. We have 3 questions. I'm going to go after one of them because it's directly related to what Hema was just presenting. Hema, one of the questions, I mean, clearly the 50% reduction in time is awesome. The question is, how long did it take roughly from start to finish to get phase 1 out the door?
So phase 1 took us about 4 months and phase 2 took us about 2 months. So in all, we were able to complete the entire automation process, including the nice to have features, in about 6 months.
Okay. George, maybe we can take one more question. It was around this whole idea, and I think this is, it depends. The question was, how long does it take for an investment to pay for itself? And I don't know if you want to shed some light on that. The question again is, if you're building a mobile app, how long does it take typically for the investment to pay for itself?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, Pete. You know, there's some variables there, but definitely the trend, you know, is that the cost of doing these types of mobile apps is trending down. So, you know, we look at, you know, very quick, short return on investment, really. But it doesn't, you know, it's not the same level of effort as it used to be to do this sort of thing, you know, years ago. And so, you know, it's much quicker you have a much quicker return on your investment now.
Yeah, that's so true. I actually was just recently reading whether it's I was reading one where a customer-facing app within 1 month it paid for itself, and some internal options where they were getting 50, 60, 70% improvements in productivity. I think Hema just talked about a 50% improvement in a process and cutting it down from 12 months to 6 months or 8 months to 4 months. You can see is pretty significant. Well, look, I don't want to keep people late. I'm going to fly right here just to let you know that Impiger we've been engaging in digital transformation, whether it be customer-facing, helping you enable digital transformation for your customer-facing engagements, employees, helping you automate the decision process with providing information at your fingertips. We've been doing it quite some time. I think George mentioned that. If you do have a need, or if you have any questions, I also do want to recommend that this was, again, the fourth webinar that we've done on mobile strategy. We've taken looks at decision-making, mobile dashboards. We've taken a look at customer-facing applications, and today try to give you a little snapshot into the power of employee engagement. So I do encourage you in the future to take a look at our website. All of these webinars will be available. You will get the slides for this presentation. Let me just take one more second to thank my partner in crime, George Cowgill, who is our Chief Technology Officer, and of course our guest speaker, Hema Shankar. Great job. Thank you for sharing that story with us, Hema.
Sure thing, Pete.
Thanks, Pete.
All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. I want to thank you again for spending time with Impiger, and I hope we get a chance to chat soon. Take care.